All right, good morning. It's good to see everyone this morning. I hope everyone's having a good start to the week. A little cooler today and tonight. Most believe it's blackberry winter, so hopefully it is, and that'll lead us right into some warmer weather. But it is, I think it's supposed to be down around 39 tonight. Actually, Kimberly left for Utah this morning, and it'll be colder here than it will be in Utah. So they're supposed to be in the 80s out there. So it's crazy. Yep. But cool spell. I love the changes. I'd hate to live somewhere where it was the same all year round. I enjoy the changes, but I do enjoy warmer weather. But hope everyone's having a good week. Of course, want to share our condolences with Miss Joan and her sister-in-law, Miss Shirley, passed away earlier this week. We had added her to our prayer list a couple of weeks ago. She wasn't doing very well, and she passed away this week. So please remember that family. I don't know that I got any other updates. Does anyone have any other updates on any of those? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I have on Sunday. She said, tell everybody she's doing great.
She's doing good. She started her therapy yet?
Yeah, she had last week.
Okay, so you didn't hear that. Miss Janie said to tell everybody thank you for the prayers. Her hip replacement went well, and she's doing therapy. So pray for her during therapy. That's a difficult time. That's actually the most painful time of it all as you go through therapy trying to get back on your feet. So, Sister Ruth, how's Cindy?
She had a little bit of faith this time than she did before.
Did she really? Okay. Is it? It's not this week. Is it?
Next week.
Next week. Okay. So remember, Cindy had a little bit more difficult time with the treatment this time. So remember her. She goes back not this week, but the next week for treatments. Another treatment, John.
Please remember Judy Johnson's sister-in-law. Her brother died last night. He was in the Tishomingo Living Center, I believe. He passed away last night.
Okay. Judy Johnson's sister-in-law's brother.
B.J. Cooksey.
What'd you say his last name is? Cooksey. Passed away from the Tishomingo Living Center. So remember that family.
Harold's aunt passed away yesterday, and she was 90.
What was her name?
Joyce Grantham, and she's from Covington, and they're not going to have a service. They're going to cremate her and put her ashes with her husband. Joyce
Grantham. Grantham. Joyce Grantham. Mrs. Harold's aunt passed away, 90 years old, from Covington.
We've been bringing it up about Paul's
this week.
This week.
Wednesday. So please remember Paul. We've been talking about it, but please be in prayer for him. He's having a lot of pain with his back, and he'll have surgery on Wednesday. You know how those back surgeries are, so be in prayer on his behalf that everything goes well and he gets some relief this week. Did get a good update on Mom. She went to the heart doctor, and her heart is in good shape. So all the fluid, according to Dr. Morgan, is not really from congestive heart failure. It's from not being able to walk. Your body, when you move and walk and all, muscles force the fluid out. And if you're not able to do that, guess what? The fluid builds up. So he's taken all the salt out of her diet, which means she can't eat anything base. He told her if it doesn't come off an animal, you don't eat it. So but he said, if you go and it's something square, I ain't never seen a square cow. So he was kind of, but it makes sense, and so he's taken it, and she's actually, since she started taking the salt out, she's continually losing weight every day, so it's helping a lot. And so appreciate no salt. 2 grams of salt, that's basically nothing. And when Dr. Morgan talked about, you see these low sodium, he said, well, let me tell you about low sodium. You got a block of sodium and you got low sodium, it's still a block of salt. So you don't do any low sodium. you take it completely out. So it's helped her. It's helped her a lot with her fluid and trying to get that down. So appreciate your prayers on her behalf. We've had fun this week. She's been having something eat through the ceiling. I couldn't find it. Well, we figured out squirrels were going through in a hole above the air conditioner that we didn't know there. So I went over Thursday afternoon and boarded it up. Well, 3 of the squirrels got hung in the attic. And then one of the squirrels was on top crying because the other 3 were hung in there. So we've been trying to catch the squirrels and get them out of the attic. So that's been a lot of fun. So we haven't had any luck yet. But yes, ma'am.
We've had a good showing of Strickland ladies
Yesterday.
I think Carolyn counted 26.
Yes, a good showing of Christian ladies that went to Foot Street for the Ladies' Day. We actually went by and I saw, all the cars and everyone loading up. So appreciate all the ladies going and supporting that at Foot Street. Anything else? All right, let's have our prayer. Father, we're so thankful for this first day of the week. So thankful to be able to be here this morning. That you give us good health that allows us to be here. We know, Father, that there are those that are struggling with their health, that are even put that aside, the pain and all, and still here this morning because they desire to be closer to you. And there's others, Father, that we talk about this morning, and many, Father, that we didn't mention their names, but they're on our prayer list from week to week and day to day that are just too bad a shape, Father, to be able to be here. Many of them are worshiping with us online. We're so thankful for them. So thankful that you bless us in a way that we can stream our services so that those that can't be here with us can at least worship with us. And we pray, Father, whatever is ailing them, that you will help them and that they will be better and be able to return here, Father. We know that you set up the church, Father, to be together on the first day of the week, to be together and to fellowship together, to fellowship with you, and to remember your Son's death, burial, and resurrection as we partake of the Lord's Supper here in a little while. And we need to be together, Father, in order to get the fullness of that relationship with each other and especially with you. We're thankful for your love, Father. I ask you to bless us as we study your word this morning. Open it up to us, Father, and give us wisdom to make application. All these blessings and prayers we ask in Jesus' name, and amen. Right, thankful for Brother Lawrence filling in again. Kimberly and I went to Louisville last weekend, spend the weekend with Abby and Ben. Had a good worship service with them on Sunday, but we, of course, always miss being here. But it's fun being with family. Enjoy that. It's a quick trip. Won't be that long. Becca will be gone. She called Thursday night and said, "Turned in my last homework ever." And so she got one more test this week and she'll be done, and then I'll be graduating May the 10th and then off to Texas. So I dread that. I dread that part. But 2 Samuel, we have spent the last couple of weeks talking about David and Bathsheba, and this story, all the stories of the Bible intrigue me, and especially when in the Old Testament. It's the reason I love to study the Old Testament so much, because the thing that makes the stories in the Bible so intriguing is no matter how often and no matter how many times you study those stories, you'll continue to learn and continue to learn. And I have read and I've studied David and Bathsheba and all the things around it. There's no telling how many times in my almost 62 years. But I have dug in the past week more into Uriah than I ever have, and learned a lot of things that I didn't know about Uriah. And actually, after we do go back and talk about what's been talked about the last couple of weeks, I want to talk a little bit more about Uriah. But David had ventured to his windowsill, and he looked down and he saw a woman bathing, and he inquired about her. And when he inquired about her, they said, that's Bathsheba, Uriah the Hittite's wife. And David goes on and he has her brought to him. He has sexual relations with her. And then she sends back to David and says, I am pregnant. And then as soon as David finds that out, he begins to devise a plan on how he can cover it up. And the way he devised that plan to cover it up was to have Uriah the Hittite, her husband, brought back to Jerusalem, and he would allow him basically to have, let's see, what they call it in the military? What was it they call it? When you got a weekend off? Furlough. So, when you're in the military, you get a weekend furlough, you get to go, and if you've seen any of the movies from, the GI days, when they got those weekend flurries, they let it all hang out. And a lot of that was because of the stress that they had been under in the war situation. You can't imagine, waking up 24, not even sleeping a lot of times, but 24/7, afraid that you won't take a next breath. And so they get that furlough time, and it gives them time to take their mind away from all of that. And so David thought that he would bring Uriah back to Jerusalem, and he would basically do the same thing. That he would go to his wife, he'd have a relationship with his wife, and she would announce that she was pregnant, that it was Uriah's and not David's, that everything would be hunky-dory and he could move on with his life. But Uriah wasn't that type of soldier. And when Uriah refused to sleep and go in and be with his wife because of his connection to his soldiers, all of those that he fought with, David became angry. And he even went to the point that he had him sit and eat with him and got him drunk. And thinking that if I get him drunk, then he'll be out of his mind and he'll go and do what he needs to do with his wife and cover everything up. But Uriah would not do that as well. And then so David sent a letter back with Uriah to the battlefront, and that letter told Joab, said, put Uriah at the hottest point, the heaviest fighting, and then draw back from him, hoping that when he did that, of course, Uriah would be put to death. And then everything would be covered up. He could take Bathsheba as his wife, and everything would be hunky-dory. And it would be possibly in front of the people, but who would it not be with? Yeah. That's the thing that makes this so fascinating is not in a good way, but in a bad way, is how close David had been in a relationship with God all of these years, what all he knew about God and God's existence, that God knew everything, that God was in control of everything. But it proves to us that Satan can put something into our heart and we can forget. We can allow sin to cause us to go stupid in our minds about things. And that's what happened to David, is sin, the sin of lust caused him to completely lose his mind over what was going on. But I want to talk a little bit more about Uriah this morning. Hittites lived in and around Canaan before Abraham's time. And when Joshua brought Israel into Canaan, God told them to kill everyone. But they didn't follow suit with that. And they failed at that. And many of the Hittites assimilated into Jewish religion and became converts of Judaism. Uriah was born a Jew because his parents were part of those converts that had assimilated into Judaism, and he lived among the Jewish Hittites, and that's why he's referred to as Uriah the Hittite rather than just Uriah. Otherwise, he would have not been able to, been allowed to marry Bathsheba, being a Gentile, if he would not have been a convert of Judaism. The other thing is his home was close to the palace of David because of his connection with David. And that gave the opportunity for David to see Bathsheba bathing on the roof. You see, Uriah wasn't just another soldier in David's army. If you look at 2 Samuel 23 and 8 verses 8 through 39 and 1 Chronicles 11 verses 10 through 47, in both of these chapters God lists all the mighty men of David, 30 or so men that were his inner circle, closest to him, because they fought so bravely to put him into the king's seat. In 2 Samuel, the last name on the list is Uriah the Hittite. There were 37 of them in all, and as it begins to name those 37, it starts naming those that were the most valiant and giving a little bit of history of what they had done in order to be called the most valiant. Uriah the Hittite was the last of those 37, and nothing was said about him and his, called out about him being any other extraordinary like the beginning was. But he was set apart from all of those soldiers that followed David as one of the 37, one of the inner circle. 1 Chronicles 11 and 10 says, "These also are the chief of the mighty men whom David had, who strengthened himself with him in his kingdom and with all Israel to make him king according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel." I didn't know that. All of this time, I guess I had read through this and not caught. I just always thought that Uriah was just another one of the soldiers. And if you read through and miss this part, you'll think, well, David don't have a clue. He just brings Uriah in. He don't know him from any of the other soldiers, and he sends him out and puts him to death. But David had a relationship with Uriah before all of this happened. And the reason I can say that is, what have we learned up until this time about what David thought about his soldiers, his people? He loved them. He showed over and over and over. Remember the men that he sent in order to meet the king's son, Hannah, and offer him condolences because his dad, the king, had died. And they cut half of the beard off and stripped them and sent them back. He went and met them and told them to stay there until their beards grew back so they wouldn't be shamed. And it showed how much he cared for his people. Here you got the 37 of his inner circle. He knew them all. He probably not only knew them, but he probably helped train them. And Uriah was one of them. It has all these things going on in my mind. Is, well, if he knew Uriah, then he probably knew Bathsheba before all this happened. And if he knew Uriah and Bathsheba, had he seen Bathsheba bathing before, and that's why he chose not to go to war, because he had lust had caused him to make bad decisions. The Bible doesn't tell us that. The Bible just tells us that he was taking a nap. He gets up from his nap and he goes to the window and he sees a woman bathing and she's beautiful. He inquires about her, which means it gives us the idea that he didn't know who it was, or he wouldn't have had to inquire. If he knew it was Bathsheba, he wouldn't have had to inquire. But he inquired who she was, and it said she was Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. But what does it do for us in thinking about what David did to Uriah now that we know that Uriah had a relationship with him before he had him put to death? It makes it worse. Why is it important for us to understand all of that? Brother Lawrence talked about that this morning. Why is it important for us to know how bad it was, how bad a decision that David had made because of lust? Did Dave?
There's
I'm sorry.
consequences.
I'm sorry.
There's consequences to sin.
There's consequences to sin, but also, did God quit using David the rest of his life?
No.
So what does that tell us?
God's forgiving.
I'm sorry.
God is a forgiving God.
And God can do what no matter what we've done?
Use it.
He can continue to use us. I worry sometimes that people have been living in sin and they come back to the Lord and they repent, or maybe even they've never been baptized for the remission of their sins, but someone shares with them the gospel and they're baptized for the remission of their sins, but because of the sin that they've been in, I can get to heaven, but God can't use me in His kingdom because I've been so bad. The story of David tells us we're wrong if we have that mindset.
There's an interesting thing about the Hittites. In the first part of the 20th century, all these scholars that didn't necessarily believe the Bible, they had said there's no evidence that there was ever such a people as the Hittites that exist. And then sometime in the 20th century, archaeologists found this huge empire that the Hittites had and found all this evidence. And so now in major universities, the Hittites are studied as an example of an old nation.
Yeah, I didn't know that, Brother Lawrence, until I studied out Uriah, and I went in and started, just Googling and looking about the Hittite nation. And now, based on what archaeologists have found, it was as big or bigger than Egypt. Their nation at one time was. I never knew that. And I always kind of wondered in the back of my mind, why did they not just call him Uriah? Why did they call him Uriah the Hittite? And of course, the assimilation into Judaism is why they were named differently. They were Gentiles that took on Judaism. But I encourage you to go back and look at the Hittite and study it, because it's fascinating that for so many years that there wasn't really nothing known about them, and then they find all of this stuff, and they were this huge nation at one time.
You made a comment that you may not have known Bathsheba, but usually when he might have been around her, she probably had a veil and a few clothes on.
Yes.
Didn't know what she looked like.
That's a very good point. And I didn't even think about that. You didn't hear that. Sister Kathy said that if he had met Bathsheba with Uriah, which leads us to believe he had, she probably was fully clothed with veils, so that he didn't really see anything but her eyes. So seeing a woman that he had only seen in that way with no clothing on, he probably didn't know who she was. So that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about it from that side. So it's possible that he knew that was the home. Well, he knew that was the home of Uriah and Bathsheba, but he probably didn't know who it was as far as the nudity, because he had never seen her that way before. Thank you. That's awesome. Any other comments before we move on?
When they told him that it was the wife of Uriah, he should have known better.
Yes, ma'am. He should have known better. Even when he looked on her, his first response should have been to turn away and walk away from it. But then when he asked who it was, and they said it's the wife of Uriah, because of his relationship with Uriah, it should have stopped there. But the problem was lust had already taken a hold of him. Lust had completely filled him from head to toe and was in control of every move he made. That's why, we talk about the Christian life and that the Christian life is difficult. The reason that the Christian life is difficult is we deal with those temptations every day. And sometimes those, it's harder to walk away from some temptations than it is others, because we all have different sins that cause us problems. And that's what, one of the things that I tie this back to is one of the things that David failed and a lot of the patriarchs failed at is they married multiple wives and had concubines, even though God did not desire them to have more than one woman, one wife. And I wonder sometimes if because of having all those wives and concubines caused David lust to overtake him more if he'd only had one wife. And Solomon, does not Solomon fall into the same trap? It was the love of women that pulled him away. And he saw that with his dad, David. David saw that in the house of Saul. And so that leads me to believe that the reason that David had so much trouble with lust is because what that brought on, the sin of having multiple wives and concubines. What's a concubine? A what?
Kind of a halfway wife.
Yeah, they're not married. That's just someone he has sexual relationships with, and she works for him and all. And David had those, and Solomon had those. You go back and look at Israel. A lot of the times that was the failure. Sexual lust is a difficult for man and woman even today.
If you think about it, in that day when they had some polygamy so prevalent, how can a man commit adultery? He's just shopping for another wife.
Yeah, you ever heard the grass is not always greener on the other side? You see these horses and cows, and they got this whole pasture full of green grass, and they got their heads stuck through the barbed wire fence, eating the same grass that's on the other side. And it ain't even any better, and ain't even any different. And so it is where they had all this polygamy going on. I don't remember how many wives and concubines David had or Solomon had, but that wasn't enough.
When the Pharisees asked Jesus in Matthew 19 about divorcing a wife and marrying another, I think they were shocked when he told them, when you do that, but to them it's just shopping for a new wife.
Yeah.
A better one, a younger one.
Younger one.
And he told them, when you do that, that's adultery.
Yep.
And they thought they were so pure. The Pharisees were supposed to be the purest of the pure.
Yeah, and if you study that history, what were they divorcing for? Her hair looked bad when she got up that morning.
Yeah, she burned the biscuits.
She burned the biscuits. She doesn't know how to cook. I'm serious. That's what they were divorcing for is, and of course a lot of those marriages were prearranged with families and all, but they would make any excuse in the world to divorce so that they could move on to someone they thought would be better. And Jesus told them, said, that's not the way God meant it. That's not the way God set it up. From the beginning, God said one man, one woman. When they're married, they become one flesh. And that's the way God intended it from the beginning.
I think Solomon had 700 concubines.
700 concubines.
That's the reason he didn't know where he was going or coming.
Yeah. If you didn't hear that, John said Solomon had 700 concubines and he didn't know whether he was going or coming.
So he wasn't wise in everything.
No, he wasn't wise in everything.
He became about the biggest fool in
Yeah,
his day.
that's exactly. And he tell you that. If you look at, especially towards the end of his life, that's basically what he says. I was a fool. And there's going to be many a fool standing before God on Judgment Day, unfortunately. But we need to learn. That's why God gives us all of this information about David, both the positive and negative, so that we can learn from not just David, all the individuals of the Bible. A lot of them God gives us more detail than He does the other because He wants us to learn. He wants us to understand how righteous David was, but at the same time, David was human. And being human, he had the inability at this time to say no to sin. But that didn't mean that God couldn't use him. And yes, ma'am.
He
Chose. Yeah. He chose to sin.
not let you be tempted beyond your will.
Yeah.
So even the Lord showed him the way out when the man said, Uriah's wife.
Yes. If you didn't hear that, David's choices. He had a way out as soon as, like Sister Carolyn said, that it was announced that Bathsheba was Uriah's wife. Oh, that's Uriah. He's one of my best soldiers. Even if it wasn't, I need to stay away from adultery, he had the opportunity to say, no, that's Uriah's wife. But then he also had more opportunity when Uriah came back and said no. You know, when he said, no, I'm not going to go have relations with my wife, and that went on twice. David sent him. He wouldn't. He slept on basically the doorstep. David gets him drunk, and he still wouldn't go. David could have said right then, this is not going to work. I need to fess up. But he chooses to get deeper and deeper into sin. What happens when you tell a lie? Most of the time you tell another lie to cover it up, and another lie to cover it up, and another lie to cover it up, and that's what was going on with David. He made a mistake, and he just kept digging the hole deeper and digging the hole deeper, trying to cover up his sin. And of course, we'll find out the consequences. He'll live with consequences until he dies.
Yeah.
Until he dies. 2 Samuel 11:16 says, and as Joab was, and this goes, David has already sent the letter back with Uriah to inform, and as we go through this, think about Joab. Think about what Joab must be thinking. Think about all these soldiers in relationship to Uriah, because Uriah, that's the reason it's so important to us to understand that Uriah just wasn't another foot soldier. He was, all of those hundreds and thousands of soldiers looked differently as those 37 of the inner circle of David. And even though he wasn't Joab and wasn't the leader, Uriah stood out. And all of a sudden, Joab is giving the command to pull back and not just leave Uriah the Hittite. It was a group. I don't know if you caught this or not, but it wasn't just Uriah that dies. There were several that die because of David's sin. So Joab was besieging the city, and he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men, and the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Doesn't tell us how many. A lot of times you would think probably that Uriah, being one of the 37, that he may have commanded a small group. Maybe in the military today, a platoon is a small group, and you have multiple platoons that's in a brigade. And Uriah probably was the leader of one of these smaller groups of maybe a platoon. And so all of the army goes into this specific place where the fighting was so heavy, and they all pull away except for Uriah and that platoon that he was leading. And however many of those men that were with him, when the rest of the army pulled back, maybe all of them didn't lose their life, but Uriah and the majority of them did lose their life because of the sin of David. Job 24:14 says, the murderer rises before it is light, that he may kill the poor and needy, and in the night he is like a thief. Verse 15 says, the eye of the adulterer also waits for the twilight, saying, no eye will see me, and he veils his face. David thought that he had committed adultery out of the eyes of the people. He thought that he had committed murder out of the eyes of the army, out of the eyes of the people, but he will be found out. God will make sure, of course, that he will be found out. Then Job, I'm sorry.
You notice also he had Uriah carry the letter
Yeah.
to him to kill him.
Yeah. You didn't hear Sister Kathy. Not only did he command for Uriah basically to be put to death, but he had Uriah carry his own death warrant inside a letter. It was probably sealed. I think Brother Lawrence brought this out last week, probably with the wax and the signet. But Uriah had the opportunity. You know, he had to be wondering, what's going on? Why was I called back? Why was David, it had to be out of the ordinary, so he had to be wondering. But he was such a righteous soldier, and I know God wanted us to see how righteous of a soldier Uriah was. How good of a man he was, which made this sin, this murder, that much worse. That he carried his death warrant back to Joab. What kind of man was Joab? Joab was a murderer, remember? He murdered, remember his brother was put to death in battle. And he took vengeance out at the gate of the city, not during war. He was a murderer. And so Joab wasn't a good man, but he was a good military leader. And so I wonder what Joab thought in all of this. He may not have thought other than, well, Uriah must have done something that made David mad. Or he must have done something to wrong David. So I figured Joab was thinking that Uriah was the culprit. Of course, he finds out later that Uriah had nothing to do with it. But at the time, I'm sure he thought that Uriah had done something wrong. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war, and charged the messenger, saying, when thou hast made an end of telling the matters of the war unto the king, and if it so be that the king's wrath arise, and he say unto thee, wherefore approached ye so nigh unto the city, when you did fight, knew you not that they were shoot from the wall, who smote Abimelech, the son of Jerubasheth? Did not a woman cast a piece of millstone upon him from the wall, that he died in Thebaz? Why went ye nigh the wall? Then say thou, thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. And that's from Judges 9:53. Why did Joab have the messenger ready to tell that to David if David was mad because they had lost the skirmish? He didn't have a clue why David wanted Uriah killed, did he? He didn't know why David wanted them to send Uriah or go and fight against the hottest part of the wall, and then everybody pull back and basically lose that skirmish. So he had the messenger ready to tell David something in case he got mad because they had lost the skirmish.
Maybe it's Joab trying to help cover up.
It may be.
Giving him all these possibilities.
Yes. Yeah, it's as Brother Lawrence says, we don't know the whole story, but it possibly could have been Uriah helping him cover up. Joab helping him cover up. But he finishes with, after he talks about, what happened in Judges 9 and 53 with Abimelech, your servant Uriah is dead. And so the messenger went and came and showed David all that Joab had sent him for. And the messenger said unto David, surely men prevailed against us and came out at us into the field, and we were upon them, even unto the entering of the gate. And the shooter shot from off the wall upon the servants, and some of the king's servants be dead, and their servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. He didn't have to tell him the other story. All David wanted to know was that last statement. That's all. He didn't really care. And that's what makes this so wrong and so different from the way David has been up into this time. He didn't care about any of the others that had died. He only cared about one thing, that his sin had been covered up, that Uriah was dead. That's all he cared about. Which is totally opposite of the David that we have been shown up until this point. And it shows us what sin can do to people. Have you ever seen a good person get caught up into sin and it completely change them? We've probably seen it in our own families. May have seen it in our own lives. But that's what happened to David. He got caught up in a sin, and the individual that we had saw that was so godly, so humble, all of a sudden is right the opposite of what he had been up until this time. Then listen to David's response. David said unto the messenger, thus shalt thou say unto Joab, let not this thing displease thee, for the sword devoureth one as well as another. Make thy battle more strong against the city, and overthrow it, and encourage thou him. And you see my statement here. I'm sure the messenger was shocked that David wasn't upset about the skirmish, about the failure, about losing the skirmish, about the death. David kind of blows it off. Tell him not to worry about it. It happens in war. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. That's basically the message David sent back. Now, he says, regroup and go and take the city. I'm sure it didn't make sense. I'm sure the messenger's like, I don't understand. Why did we pull back? And now the entire army's going to go. They had no clue. And I'm sure it didn't make sense to any of them why this had happened. And so he sends a messenger to Joab to encourage him to carry on the bad things that had already happened. Any other comments? All right, we'll begin at verse 26 next week. And next week we'll get into the story of, it's basically 9 months later. Think about, why did God wait 9 months in order to send Nathan to David to confront him about his sin? And we'll talk about that next week. Thank you.